students, this video is on the thalamus, which is also called as the dorsal diencephalon or dorsal diencephalon. In the last video we have learned about the diencephalon and its subdivision, okay, how it is divided into the dorsal diencephalon and ventral diencephalon, that is thalamus, and mainly the hypothalamus. This video is for the external and internal features of the thalamus. So in this video I am just going to tell you the external and internal features of this thalamus, and in the next video I will cover the connection and functions of the thalamus, right? So moving to the next slide. Now this is the just once again a repetition of what we saw it into the last video. The diencephalon is broadly divided into thalamus and hypothalamus, okay, and this is demarcation is between the hypothalamic sulcus. This dotted line shows the hypothalamic sulcus. So part above the hypothalamic sulcus is the thalamus part, okay, or dorsal diencephalon, and the part below this triangular area here below, it is the hypothalamus part, okay, or the ventral diencephalon. Now this dorsal and ventral diencephalon, which are collectively called as the diencephalon, it is located between or surrounded by rather between the right and the left cerebral hemisphere, completely covered by the right and left cerebral hemisphere. And if you will see the proximo-distal location of this, it is just above the midbrain. See, this part is the midbrain and this is located above the midbrain, okay. This part is the midbrain here. The two colliculi are seen here in the posterior aspect of the midbrain. The pineal gland is here. So this above the hypothalamic sulcus, this dotted line is the thalamus, and below it is the hypothalamus, located, okay, now below between the midbrain and above between the cerebral hemisphere. So I move to the next part, and after this brief introduction of the dorsal and ventral diencephalon, I now will restrict myself to the thalamus part only. So we will learn about the external and internal feature of thalamus. Now this diagram is purely a theoretical diagram, okay, and these are the two right and the left thalamus on either side of the midline or median plane. And if you see the thalamus, okay, as they never have been seen because all their surfaces are hidden except the medial surface, they look like an egg, okay, they are egg-shaped masses of the gray matter, okay, right and left thalamus. Now if you see the dimension of this thalamus, they are about 4 centimeter long, okay, and they are placed obliquely. That means their anterior ends are close to each other as compared to their posterior end of the thalamus. Now this has two ends, an anterior end and a posterior end, and 4 surfaces, and we will just see the surfaces: a superior surface, an inferior surface, a medial surface, and a lateral surface. Now these are the gray masses, okay. The thalamus is collection of the neurons, okay. So they are the collection of various nuclei, as we will see just after few slides, okay. And these nuclei are collection of the gray mass. They are the relay station for sensory impulses. So main function of thalamus is it acts as a relay station for the sensory impulses. Some of the sensation can also be perceived here, which we will talk in the next video when we will go to its connection and functions, okay. So this is just a theoretical diagram which you are seeing, okay. Thalamus is never seen like this, okay, right. Let us learn about its ends. So this is the thalamus here. right? This is the hypothalamic sulcus, which is continuous in the midbrain with that of the cerebral aqueduct. This is the interventricular foramina, which communicates with the lateral ventricle, and this is the medial wall of the third ventricle, and this is formed by the thalamus. So this large mass of the gray matter which you are seeing here is the thalamus. It has two ends, as we have learned. It has an anterior end which is narrow, and it lies anteriorly and close to the midline, and this is just behind the interventricular foramina. So this is the anterior end, and then this is the posterior end of the thalamus, which is a overhanging part. It is hanging over the superior colliculi, okay, part of the midbrain. So this part of the posterior end of the thalamus, which projects and overhang the posterior surface of the midbrain or superior colliculi, it is called as the pulvinar. Okay, this is called as the pulvinar. Okay, now we will see that in the posterior part of the thalamus there are also the presence of the medial and lateral geniculate bodies, okay, which are the part of the pulvinar, right, on the part of the thalamus itself. Let us come to the surfaces. Okay, if we come to the surfaces, as I said that there are four surfaces. This one which is seen in the mid-sagittal section of the cerebral hemisphere or brain here, this surface which we are seeing onto the thalamus is the medial surface of the thalamus, and this medial surface of the thalamus is lined by the ependyma. This is because it is forming the wall of the third ventricle, because third ventricle, the upper part of third ventricle is formed by the thalamus, hypothalamic sulcus, and then this part of the hypothalamus. So this is the third ventricle. So the medial wall which is lined by the ependyma of the thalamus is seen here. Now there is a part of the thalamus, right and left part of the thalamus, okay, anteroinferiorly they are connected with each other, and this part is called as the interthalamic adhesion, which I am showing here. This part is called as the interthalamic adhesion. So on the medial surface of the thalamus, between anterior and posterior end of the thalamus, okay, this is that medial surface. This is only the surface which can be visualized on in the section, mid-sagittal section. The rest of the other surface, superior, lateral and inferior of thalamic surface, they are hidden, okay, they are in contact with the cerebral, okay, completely covered by the portions of the cerebral hemisphere. Let us come to the superior surface, okay, and superior surface we can see very well if you cut a coronal section of the thalamus. Okay, so let's go to the next slide where we will see the surface. Now in this diagram, let us see this diagram here, the smaller one. This is the thalamus and this is the coronal section, where we can see here, this is the right and left lateral ventricle, this is the fornix, okay, and septum pellucidum. In this also you can see septum pellucidum, corpus callosum, right and left ventricle are here, and these two masses here are the thalamus. This is a coronal section, and this is the medial surface which we have already seen, and this is the interthalamic adhesion. The two thalami, they are interconnected with each other. So I was describing you the superior surface. So this part where I am moving my cursor, this part is the superior surface. Okay, if you can see in this, otherwise I will show you in this diagram that dark area is the medial, okay, and or extent, okay, limit of the superior surface. It is the medial limit of the superior surface, okay. And in this superior surface, what you will see here, this dark area is nothing but the band of the white fiber here also, but it is not darkly stained, I would say colored, so it will be difficult for you to see, but here you can see this is called as the stria medullari thalami. Stria medullaris thalami. This is on the medial most, okay, and the rest of the superior surface, if you see, this forms the floor of the lateral ventricle, and if you trace it still further laterally, it is just I mean to say limited by the caudate nucleus. Okay, so the superior surface is laterally, it is with the I mean to say caudate nucleus comes and cover over the dorsal or the superior surface of the thalamus. Now at the junction of the caudate nucleus and the surface superior or dorsal surface of thalamus, there are two structures are seen. One is called as the thalamostriate vein and the stria terminalis, that dot-like structure which you are seeing here. Okay, on this side also, the blue color is the thalamostriate vein, and you can just enlarge the view in your apparatus if you can. Okay, and this is the stria terminalis. So thalamostriate vein and stria terminalis, okay, and stria medullary thalami, they are the structures which are on the superior or dorsal surface. The superior or dorsal surface, similar to the medial surface, is also covered by the ependyma because it forms the floor of the fourth ventricle. Let us see the lateral surface. Okay, so this is the lateral surface, and on the lateral surface there is a layer of the white matter, okay, fibrous tissue, and this white matter is called as external medullary lamina. Okay, external medullary lamina, and just beneath the I mean say outside the external medullary lamina, you are seeing this concentric gray mass or the line, and this is the reticular nucleus. Okay, this is called as the reticulum. On either side you can see here this covering to the external medullary lamina, this is the reticular nucleus. Now, beyond this reticular nucleus, the whole of the lateral surface is in relation to the band of the white fibers, okay, which are coming and going towards the cerebrum, cerebral cortex, and this is the internal capsule. Okay, this is called as, so it is in relation to the internal capsule. So lateral surface, okay, ultimately on most laterally it is in relation to the internal capsule. Let us see the inferior surface in this. So this is the inferior surface of the thalamus, which more medially it is in relation to the hypothalamus. This is the location in the third ventricle where my cursor is. This must be the hypothalamic sulcus, and beyond this, this is the hypothalamus. Okay, and more laterally and posteriorly it is in relation to the subthalamic area which contain this nucleus, and this nucleus is the subthalamic nucleus. So it is in relation to the subthalamic part as well as the hypothalamic part, inferior surface. Thus I have told you all the relations of the thalamus: superior, inferior, medial and the lateral. Let us move to the next slide. Now here we can see that the internal structure. So external structure of thalamus are over. Now we go to the what is there inside each thalamus, right and left thalamus, and if we cut a horizontal section of thalamus, we will see that the thalamus can be divided into two parts, that is it has the gray matter just excuse me, and the white matter. Now the white matter is in the form of this Y-shaped, okay, lamina. This is the Y-shaped lamina. These are the two limbs of the Y-shaped lamina, and this is the stem, and these are all remaining part is the gray matter. This is the right thalamus cut horizontally. This is the medial side and this is the lateral side, which is in relation to the internal capsule and reticular nucleus. Medial side forming the wall of the third ventricle, okay, covered by ependyma, and this is the Y-shaped, the internal medullary lamina. About the external medullary lamina we have already seen. This surface is covered by white matter where I am moving my cursor, and this is in relation to the external medullary lamina. That's why this is called as internal medullary lamina. So the gray masses within this single thalamus are thus divided into three parts: an anterior part between the two limbs of the Y, a lateral part which is on the lateral side, and a medial part which is towards the third ventricle. Okay, so three parts are there: anterior, medial and lateral part of the gray matter. Now this gray matter, okay, will be having many subdivisions of the or they may be having many nuclei, collection of the neurons, gray masses, which will be having a particular function. That's why they are classified into the various nuclei. Now on this side of this diagram, it is the superior surface of the thalamus is shown, anterior lobe and the posterior end is shown, which is the pulvinar, and this posterior end will have the medial and lateral geniculate body. Interthalamic adhesion is there. But here we have given a section on the other half, the thalamus, that is in the right thalamus. We are seeing it from superior aspect, and a section is cut horizontally. It is cut horizontal section is there, so that this is the internal medullary lamina, Y-shaped internal medullary lamina. This is the anterior part of the gray matter, this is the medial part, and this is the lateral part of the gray matter is there. This is called as the anterior nucleus, this is called as the medial nucleus, and this will be the lateral nucleus. So three nucleus are there: anterior, medial and lateral. But then this anterior, medial, except anterior, median and lateral masses of the gray matter here are nuclei, they will show further subdivision. Okay, this is very important. You just keep on drawing this and labeling this subdivision of nuclei, because they are many and they are confusing. I will again repeat this in the next video when I will tell you the connection of each and every nuclei and the functions which are associated with these nuclei. So now I move to the next, but here you can see that the posterior part of this I mean to say thalamus is the pulvinar, and it has the medial and lateral geniculate body, which are now considered as the part of the thalamus. Similarly, the reticular nucleus is also now considered as the part of the thalamus. Now if you will see this medial nucleus here, medial, you will see that medial nucleus is divided into two parts. This is called as MD, means medial dorsal part, and there is a thin part here and another nucleus. This is called as midline nucleus or medial ventral nucleus. Okay, it is midline or medial ventral. Just remember, as it midline nucleus and a medial dorsal. So these are two divisions of the medial nucleus. Okay, medial gray mass. Anterior nucleus, we are not going to the further subdivision, consider it as a single nucleus. But in the lateral part, you will see that there are many nuclei are seen, subdivision. Now this lateral part is divided, okay, into the lateral group of nucleus, okay, and the ventral group of the nucleus. Okay, ventral group of the nucleus. So there are two subdivision in the lateral nucleus, which contains three nuclei lateral, okay, which is close to the stem of the intramedullary lamina, okay, that white matter band. It is the lateral dorsal. Most anteriorly is the in lateral group is the lateral dorsal, then it is the lateral posterior, and the third in the lateral group is the pulvinar. The third in the lateral group, which consists of medial and lateral geniculate body. So these are the three nuclei, subdivision of the lateral group of nucleus. Okay, in the lateral nucleus, lateral dorsal group of the nucleus. Then we go to the lateral ventral group of the nucleus in the lateral subdivision. So the major subdivision was lateral, in which there was a dorsal group, in which there were three: lateral dorsal, lateral posterior and the pulvinar. And this is the ventral nucleus, and in the ventral nucleus again there are the three nuclei, that is ventral anterior, ventral lateral and ventral posterior, ventral anterior, ventral lateral and ventral posterior. But this ventral posterior nucleus is further subdivided into two, that we will see in the next diagram by taking a section passing through this ventral posterior nucleus. Let us see here. Here again we have given now a coronal section here. This is passing through the thalamus on this side. This is seen from posterior aspect, pulvinar and medial and lateral geniculate body. But here in coronal section, that was a horizontal section. Now in coronal section, see this subdivision. Okay, on medial side was medial dorsal and midline nucleus. Okay, no problem, which we have already covered. But here it was the lateral posterior nucleus in the posterior, I mean to say dorsal group of the lateral group. Okay, and in the ventral group, as I said, the last nucleus of the ventral group is further divided into, okay, it is divided, that is the ventral posterior was further divided into two group, ventral posterolateral and ventral posteromedial. VPM means ventral posteromedial and ventral posterolateral. This was the, in the ventral group, the posterior most nucleus is divided into two, and this is the reticular nucleus is there, right? Now I think this is a little complicated, but you will have to draw and label it with the pencil again and again in both horizontal and the coronal section. Then only you will be able to understand, and then only we can go to the next video, which will show you the connection of these various nuclei. Let us come to the other nuclei of thalamus. Okay, this is again this coronal section, ventromedial and midline nucleus, lateral posterior nucleus, ventroposterolateral and ventroposteromedial. But this is that other nucleus, which is that this is called as the I mean to say, which is present within the this lamina. It is present within the lamina, and this gray mass which is present within the white matter or lamina is called as centromedian nucleus. It is called as centromedial nucleus. Other nuclei, which I have already said you, medial and lateral geniculate body, now they are considered as part of the thalamus, and similarly the reticular nucleus, it is the part of the thalamus. So these are also the part of the nucleus of the thalamus. This completes a lecture on the external features or external surfaces and its relation, and then the internal structure where it is divided into anterior, medial and lateral group of the nuclei. Okay, thank you very much for watching this video. I know that it is confusing, but you have to draw it, okay, again and again and label it. Okay, then you will be able to understand.